Hi, I'm Officer Maya Chen. For years, my sister Jessica mocked my career as a SWAT officer, telling everyone at family gatherings that I just play dress up with my tactical gear and pretend to be tough for attention. She thought humiliating me in front of our entire extended family would prove that real success meant her corporate executive lifestyle, not my glorified security guard job. What she didn't know was that her mockery was about to be silenced forever when armed gunmen stormed our family reunion.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you.
And the sister she'd spent years belittling became the only thing standing between our family and a massacre.
The uniform Jessica dismissed as dress up wasn't a costume. It was the result of 8 years of the most demanding training in American law enforcement. As a member of the Denver Police Department's elite SWAT unit, I'd earned my place through physical trials that broke grown men, tactical simulations that required split-second life-or-death decisions, and psychological evaluations that tested every aspect of mental resilience. My gear wasn't for show. The tactical vest could stop rifle rounds that would tear through civilian clothing like paper. The helmet was rated for explosive fragments and high-velocity impacts. The weapons I carried were precision instruments that I'd trained with for thousands of hours, achieving marksmanship scores that qualified me as one of the department's top shooters. But to Jessica, none of that mattered. In her world of corporate boardrooms and client presentations, success was measured by salary figures, corner offices, and social status. As senior vice president of marketing at Colorado's largest advertising firm, she earned twice my police salary and never let me forget it. Maya still thinks she's G.I. Joe, she'd tell her relatives at family gatherings, her voice carrying that particular tone of condescending amusement she'd perfected over the years. She gets to play with all her little toys and pretend she's saving the world, while the rest of us have real careers with real responsibilities. The dismissal stung because it revealed how little she understood about what I actually did. While Jessica created marketing campaigns for luxury car dealers and high-end restaurants, I spent my days preparing for scenarios where seconds could mean the difference between saving lives and witnessing tragedies. I joined the police force straight out of college with a degree in criminal justice, drawn by the desire to make a tangible difference in my community. The path to SWAT had been grueling. 2 years of patrol duty earning respect from veteran officers, specialized training in crisis intervention and tactical response, and finally, the selection process that eliminated 80% of applicants. The work was everything Jessica claimed it wasn't. We responded to hostage situations where negotiation skills and tactical precision determined whether families went home alive. We executed high-risk warrants against armed drug dealers who wouldn't hesitate to shoot police officers. We provided security for visiting dignitaries and responded to active shooter threats at schools and public venues. Every call could be the one where training met reality in the most dangerous way possible. Every shift required the mental preparation to use lethal force, if necessary, to protect innocent lives. Every piece of equipment I carried had been selected and tested because someone's survival might depend on its reliability. But to Jessica, none of that complexity existed. To her, I was the little sister who'd chosen a blue-collar job instead of following her path into corporate success. She measured worth by stock options and vacation packages, not by the lives protected or criminals apprehended. Our family had always been achievement-oriented, with parents who valued education and professional success above all else. Jessica had excelled in business school, earned her MBA from Wharton, and climbed the corporate ladder with the same determination she'd shown since childhood. I'd chosen a different path, one that required different sacrifices and offered different rewards. The upcoming family reunion was meant to celebrate our grandmother's 90th birthday, bringing together 3 generations of the Chen family at our traditional gathering place, the mountain resort outside Boulder, where we'd held reunions for 20 years. Jessica had been planning it for months, coordinating with dozens of relatives and organizing activities that would showcase the family's collective success. I'd planned to attend in civilian clothes, hoping to avoid the usual commentary about my career choices. What I didn't anticipate was that my dress-up gear would become the only thing capable of protecting the people Jessica cared about most.
Jessica and I had been inseparable as children, the kind of sisters who shared secrets, defended each other against playground bullies, and dreamed about our futures while camping in blanket forts in our Denver suburban home. She was 3 years older, which made her both my protector and my guide through the complexities of growing up in an immigrant family where success was measured by how far we could rise above our parents' struggles. Our parents had immigrated from Taiwan when Jessica was 5 and I was 2, bringing nothing but determination and the belief that education could provide opportunities they'd never had. My father worked double shifts at electronics manufacturing plant while attending night school for his engineering degree. My mother cleaned office buildings in the early morning hours before her classes at community college, eventually earning her accounting certification. "You girls have chances we never had," my mother would tell us during family dinners, where homework took precedence over television. "Work hard, study hard, and you can become anything you want in America." Jessica embraced this message with fierce determination. She was valedictorian of her high school class, president of the debate team, and earned a full scholarship to the University of Colorado's business school. I admired everything about her. Her confidence, her intelligence, her ability to command attention in any room she entered. "Maya's going to be just as successful as I am," Jessica would tell our parents' friends during family gatherings. "She's smart enough to do whatever she sets her mind to. We're both going to make our parents proud." For years, our relationship was built on mutual support and shared ambition. Jessica helped me with college applications, reviewed my essays, and celebrated when I was accepted to CU with a scholarship for criminal justice studies. She even seemed excited about my career choice initially. "Criminal justice is a great field," she'd told me during my freshman year. "You could become a lawyer, maybe a prosecutor, or even work for the FBI someday. There are so many opportunities for advancement." But something changed when I chose law enforcement over law school. The shift was subtle at first. Comments about the limitations of police work, suggestions that I was settling for a career beneath my potential, gentle nudges toward graduate school or federal agencies that would be more appropriate for someone with my education. "Maya could do so much more than local police work," she'd tell our relatives, her tone carrying disappointment rather than pride. "It's like she's addicted to proving how tough she is," Jessica would say during family dinners, speaking about me as if I wasn't sitting across the table. "All that tactical training and physical fitness obsession, it's like watching someone play army instead of building a real career." The dress-up comments started during my second year on the SWAT team, when Jessica visited my apartment and saw my gear bag in the hallway. She'd picked up my tactical helmet, turning it over in her hands like it was a child's toy. "This is what you spend your days thinking about?" she'd asked, her voice filled with disbelief. "Weapons and armor and playing cops and robbers? Maya, you're 26 years old. When are you going to grow up and get serious about your future?" The betrayal came during our grandmother's 88th birthday celebration, 2 years before the reunion that would change everything. The entire Chen family had gathered at the Broadmoor Resort in Colorado Springs, aunts, uncles, cousins, and family friends representing 3 generations of immigrant success stories. Jessica had spent weeks preparing a multimedia presentation showcasing our family's achievements, complete with professional photos and career highlights for each family member. When my slide appeared, the room fell silent with embarrassment that I didn't understand until I saw what she'd chosen to represent my life. Instead of my official police department photo or images from community service events, Jessica had selected a picture from my tactical training where I was rappelling down a building in full gear. She'd captioned it, "Maya Chen, still playing dress-up at 28. The room erupted in uncomfortable laughter as Jessica continued her commentary. "While the rest of us have built real careers with actual responsibilities, Maya has decided to spend her 20s playing cops and robbers with expensive toys. We keep hoping she'll grow out of this phase and use her education for something meaningful." My face burned with humiliation as 60 family members stared at me with a mixture of pity and confusion. These were people who'd watched me graduate valedictorian from high school, earn my criminal justice degree with honors, and complete some of the most demanding training in law enforcement. But in that moment, Jessica had reduced 8 years of professional achievement to a child's game. The gear alone probably cost more than most people's cars. Jessica continued, clicking to a photo she had taken of my equipment laid out for inspection. All so she can feel important while doing work that any high school graduate could handle with a few weeks of training.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
My cousin David, a software engineer, raised his hand with mock seriousness. Maya, do you get to keep the costume when you're done playing, or do you have to return it to the police station? The laughter that followed felt like physical blows. These were people who'd celebrated my college graduation, who'd expressed pride when I was accepted into the police academy, who'd seemed impressed when I told them about SWAT selection. But Jessica's presentation had reframed my entire career as an elaborate joke. I think it's wonderful that Maya found something she enjoys, my Aunt Linda added with patronizing kindness. Not everyone needs to have a serious career. Someone has to do the simple jobs too. Simple jobs? As if responding to hostage situations and active shooter threats required no skill or intelligence. As if the tactical decisions that kept civilians alive were equivalent to playing with action figures. But the cruelest cut came from our grandmother, the woman whose birthday we were celebrating. Maya, dear, she said in Mandarin, her voice carrying the weight of disappointment, when will you find a real career that brings honor to our family name? Honor to our family name. The same grandmother who'd fled communist China, who taught me that courage meant standing up for what was right regardless of personal cost, was now suggesting that my commitment to protecting others brought shame rather than pride to our family legacy. Jessica's smile was triumphant as she moved to the next slide featuring our cousin's promotion to partner at his law firm. She'd successfully repositioned my law enforcement career as a source of family embarrassment, turning my service into evidence of immaturity and poor judgment. The worst part wasn't the public humiliation. It was the realization that Jessica had been planning this moment for months. She had deliberately chosen the most unflattering photo, crafted the most dismissive caption, and timed the presentation for maximum audience impact. This wasn't spontaneous mockery born of sibling rivalry. This was calculated character assassination designed to diminish my standing within our own family. That night, I sat alone in my hotel room, staring at my tactical gear and wondering if Jessica was right. Maybe I was just playing dress-up with dangerous toys while avoiding the real responsibilities of adult life. I had no idea that in 2 years, those same toys would be the only thing standing between our family and a nightmare that would make Jessica's corporate crises seem like children's games.
In the weeks following the birthday humiliation, Jessica launched a family-wide campaign to normalize her portrayal of my career as an expensive hobby rather than legitimate professional service. Every family gathering became an opportunity to reinforce the narrative she'd established with her presentation. Maya, still in her tactical phase, became her standard explanation when relatives asked about my work. We're hoping she'll mature out of it eventually and use her intelligence for something more substantial. The term tactical phase was particularly insidious because it suggested that my 8-year law enforcement career was temporary rebellion rather than a deliberate life choice. Jessica had effectively rebranded my professional commitment as adolescent acting out that the family should patiently endure until I came to my senses. She began sharing carefully edited stories about my work that stripped away any context that might suggest danger or importance. When I mentioned responding to a domestic violence call that had escalated to a barricaded suspect situation, Jessica retold it to our parents as, Maya got to play with her special truck and talk on her radio for a few hours. When I described the tactical training required to maintain SWAT certification, the physical fitness standards, weapons proficiency testing, and scenario-based exercises, Jessica translated it for family consumption as Maya's expensive summer camp where she gets to run around and play with her friends. The most damaging aspect of her campaign was how she recruited other family members to participate in the dismissal. My cousin Jennifer, who worked as a financial advisor, started referring to my equipment as Maya's costume collection.
My uncle Robert began asking patronizing questions about whether I'd learned anything useful during my shifts, as if police work was vocational training rather than professional service. "It's sweet that Maya found something that makes her feel important," my Aunt Susan would say, with the kind of tone usually reserved for discussing children's career fantasies. "Not everyone can handle real pressure like Jessica does in her corporate position." Real pressure. As if negotiating advertising contracts involved more stress than breaching doors where armed suspects might be waiting to kill police officers? Jessica also began controlling the family narrative about our respective contributions to society. Her marketing campaigns for luxury brands were presented as important work that drove economic growth and supported hundreds of jobs. My role in reducing violent crime and protecting community safety was characterized as Maya's hobby that we support even though we don't really understand it. The financial comparisons became a constant theme. Jessica's bonus last year was more than Maya makes in 2 years, my father would say with obvious pride during family dinners. Maybe someday Maya will realize she could earn real money if she used her education properly. But perhaps the most painful manipulation was how Jessica repositioned my commitment to physical fitness and tactical readiness as evidence of vanity rather than professional necessity. My daily workouts became Maya's obsession with looking tough. My weapons training was playing with dangerous toys because she thinks it makes her special. "I worry that Maya's gotten addicted to the adrenaline and attention," Jessica confided to our mother during a conversation I overheard. "She's built her whole identity around this fantasy of being some kind of warrior, and now she doesn't know how to exist without the costume and the drama." The conversation suggested that my career choice was a psychological disorder rather than a calling to public service. Jessica had successfully pathologized my profession, making it seem like I needed intervention rather than support. Most devastatingly, she convinced our parents that encouraging my law enforcement career was enabling self-destructive behavior. "The best thing we can do for Maya is stop pretending this is a real career," she told them. "Maybe if we stop acting impressed by the dress-up games, she'll finally grow up and make responsible choices." By the time our grandmother's 90th birthday reunion was being planned, Jessica had spent 2 years systematically undermining my credibility and positioning herself as the concerned sister trying to help me face reality. The family consensus was that my tactical training and equipment were expensive toys, and my commitment to SWAT was a phase I'd eventually outgrow when I matured enough to pursue meaningful work. None of them had any idea that my toys were about to become the only thing standing between them and a nightmare that would shatter their comfortable assumptions about what constituted real danger.
The awakening came 6 months before the reunion, during a call that would forever change how I understood the gap between perception and reality. I was responding to an active shooter situation at Aurora Central High School when I realized that Jessica's dismissive narrative about my dress-up career was about to be tested in the most brutal way possible. The call came in at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. All units, shots fired at Aurora Central High School, multiple victims reported, suspect armed with rifle, SWAT response requested immediately. The dispatcher's voice carried that particular edge that meant children were in danger, and seconds mattered more than anything else in the world. As our team raced toward the school, I found myself thinking about Jessica's recent comment at our cousin's wedding. Maya gets so excited about her little emergencies, like she's the star of her own action movie. The comment had stung because it suggested that life or death situations were entertainment to me, rather than the sobering responsibility they actually represented. But sitting in the SWAT vehicle, checking my weapon and reviewing the school's floor plan while we coordinated with patrol units already on scene, I felt nothing like a movie star. I felt the familiar weight of knowing that families were counting on our training, our equipment, and our willingness to run toward danger while everyone else ran away. The scene at the school was chaos. Students and teachers were streaming out of emergency exits, while patrol officers tried to establish a perimeter and account for the wounded. The first reports indicated at least 3 victims and a gunman still active somewhere in the building's east wing. "Chen, you're on point for classroom clearing," our team leader commanded as we prepared to enter. "Rodriguez and Martinez will follow your lead. Remember, speed and precision. There are kids in there." This was the moment when Jessica's dress-up narrative met reality. The tactical gear she mocked as costume became life-saving equipment as we moved through hallways where rifle rounds had shattered windows and torn chunks out of walls. The weapons training she dismissed as playing with toys became the difference between neutralizing a threat and becoming casualties ourselves. The helmet that Jessica had held up for family ridicule deflected concrete fragments when the gunman's shot splintered the doorframe inches from my head. The body armor she called an expensive toy stopped a bullet that would have killed me when we cornered the shooter in the chemistry lab, where he'd barricaded himself with 2 terrified students. But it was the psychological training that proved most crucial. The hours of scenario-based exercises that had taught me to remain calm under stress, to make life or death decisions in split seconds, to communicate clearly with my team while processing multiple streams of information about threat location, civilian positions, and tactical options. When we finally neutralized the shooter and secured the building, I found myself standing in a hallway covered in blood and debris, surrounded by the evidence of what real violence looked like when it invaded spaces where children should have been safe. This wasn't a game or a costume party or an expensive hobby. This was the work that kept communities functioning when evil people decided to destroy innocent lives. The aftermath brought clarity about Jessica's campaign to diminish my career. While she spent her days creating marketing strategies for luxury products, I spent mine preparing for moments when preparation meant the difference between families going home intact or forever changed by preventable tragedy. 3 students had been wounded, but survived because patrol officers had responded quickly, and SWAT had neutralized the threat before he could access the crowded cafeteria where he'd planned to maximize casualties. The tactical equipment Jessica mocked had saved lives. The training she dismissed as playing had prevented a massacre. That evening, as I sat in my apartment cleaning and inspecting gear that had been tested under real combat conditions, I realized that Jessica's mockery revealed more about her understanding of the world than about my career choices. She lived in a reality where the greatest threats were missed deadlines and difficult clients, where safety was something she took for granted rather than something that required constant vigilance to maintain. I'd spent years allowing her narrative to make me question my choices, but that day had reminded me why I'd chosen this path and why it mattered more than corporate success or family approval.
After the school shooting, I made a decision that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of our family dynamics. Instead of continuing to defend my career against Jessica's mockery, I would let my actions speak louder than her words. The reunion would be my opportunity to demonstrate the value of the skills she dismissed, but not in the way any of us expected. The first element of my strategy was preparation. Jessica had been planning our grandmother's 90th birthday reunion for 8 months, coordinating with family members across the country and booking the same mountain resort we'd used for 20 years. Pine Ridge Lodge was remote enough to feel like an escape from city life, but still accessible for elderly relatives who couldn't handle serious hiking or camping. What Jessica didn't know was that I'd been quietly researching the security vulnerabilities of Pine Ridge Lodge as part of my ongoing tactical education. The resort's isolation, which made it perfect for family gatherings, also made it a potential target for criminals looking for wealthy guests in a location where police response time would be measured in hours rather than minutes. My department had actually conducted a security assessment of the area 2 years earlier when a celebrity had chosen Pine Ridge for a private event. I'd been part of the team that identified weaknesses in the facility's emergency protocols and recommended security improvements that were never implemented because management considered them unnecessarily expensive. The lodge's greatest vulnerability was its single access road, which could be easily blocked to prevent both escape and rescue. The building itself was a classic mountain retreat design, with large windows and multiple entrances that would be impossible to secure effectively. The nearest law enforcement was 45 minutes away under ideal conditions, and the area had no cell phone coverage, meaning emergency communication would depend on the lodge's landline system. I began developing contingency plans based on various threat scenarios, not because I expected trouble, but because tactical thinking had become second nature after 8 years of SWAT training. If someone wanted to rob wealthy guests or take hostages for ransom, Pine Ridge Lodge would offer everything they needed: isolated location, affluent targets, and minimal security. The second element of my strategy involved bringing appropriate equipment without alarming family members who already considered my gear excessive. I couldn't arrive at a birthday party wearing tactical gear, but I could ensure that defensive resources were available if needed. I packed my off-duty weapon and extra ammunition in my civilian luggage, along with a basic medical kit that could handle trauma injuries. I also brought a portable radio capable of reaching emergency frequencies, knowing that the lodge's isolation might require alternative communication methods. Most importantly, I prepared mentally for the possibility that Jessica's mockery might be silenced by circumstances beyond her control. If a situation arose where tactical skills were needed, I would respond with the same professionalism I brought to every emergency call, regardless of how my family had characterized my training. The third element was psychological preparation for the confrontation with Jessica that would inevitably occur during the reunion. She'd spent 2 years building a narrative about my career being an expensive game, and she would likely use the family gathering as another opportunity to reinforce that message. But I decided to stop defending myself with words and start letting actions demonstrate the value of what I did. If Jessica wanted to continue characterizing tactical training as dress-up, she was welcome to maintain that perspective until reality provided a more convincing argument. The irony was that Jessica's dismissive attitude had actually motivated me to become better at my job. Her constant suggestions that I was playing games had pushed me to take additional training courses, pursue advanced certifications, and maintain higher fitness standards than required. In trying to diminish my capabilities, she'd accidentally encouraged me to maximize them. When the reunion weekend arrived, I would be as prepared as possible for whatever challenges might arise, while Jessica would discover whether her corporate crisis management skills translated to situations where failure meant something more serious than lost revenue or missed deadlines. The mountain setting she'd chosen for its beauty and isolation was about to become the testing ground for which of our skill sets actually mattered when lives hung in the balance.
Saturday evening, October 14th, 2033. I was standing on the lodge's main deck, watching my 3-year-old nephew play with his toy trucks, while Jessica delivered another monologue about my career choices to our assembled relatives. The reunion had been proceeding exactly as I'd expected, family bonding mixed with Jessica's ongoing commentary about my tactical phase. Maya's been playing soldier for 8 years now, Jessica was telling her Uncle Thomas, her wine glass gesturing toward where I stood in civilian clothes. We keep hoping she'll grow out of it and use her education for something meaningful, but she seems committed to the costume drama. The irony was that this would be the last time Jessica would ever refer to my training as costume drama. At 7:24 p.m., the sound of vehicles approaching the access road cut through the evening air. Pine Ridge Lodge rarely had visitors after dinner time, and we weren't expecting any late arrivals to the reunion. I felt the familiar tingle of situational awareness that 8 years of tactical training had ingrained in my nervous system. 3 black SUVs with tinted windows emerged from the tree line, moving fast enough to suggest urgency, but controlled enough to indicate planning. The vehicles stopped in formation that blocked both the main entrance and the service road, creating an effective containment perimeter around the lodge. "Maya, are you expecting someone?" my father asked, noticing my focused attention on the new arrivals. Before I could answer, 8 men emerged from the vehicles, wearing tactical gear that looked disturbingly familiar. Body armor, assault rifles, and communication equipment that suggested military or law enforcement training. But their movements and positioning indicated criminal intent rather than official business.
"Everyone get inside, now!" I commanded, my voice carrying the authority that came from thousands of hours of emergency response training. "Maya, you're being dramatic," Jessica said with her usual dismissive tone. "They're probably just—" The first shots fired into the air cut off her sentence and sent our family scrambling for cover. The tactical assessment I dreaded for months was becoming reality as armed hostiles surrounded the lodge with what appeared to be a planned kidnapping or robbery operation targeting wealthy guests. "Uncle Thomas, get everyone into the main dining room, away from the windows," I shouted, while reaching for my concealed weapon. "Jessica, call 911 on the landline and tell them we have multiple armed suspects at Pine Ridge Lodge." But Jessica was frozen in shock, staring at the men who were advancing toward the lodge with weapons drawn. The corporate executive, who'd spent years mocking my dress-up games, was experiencing her first encounter with real violence, and her crisis management skills were proving inadequate for bullets and hostage situations. "Maya, what do we do?" she whispered, her voice stripped of the condescension that had characterized our relationship for years. The gunmen were shouting commands as they approached the lodge, their voices carrying the authority of people who'd done this before. "Everyone on the ground! This is a robbery! Nobody gets hurt if you cooperate!" I counted 8 hostiles with military-grade equipment, superior firepower, and tactical positioning that gave them every advantage, except one. They didn't know that one of their intended victims had spent 8 years preparing for exactly this scenario. The toys Jessica had mocked were locked in my vehicle, but the training she'd dismissed as playing was about to become the only thing standing between our family and a nightmare that would either end in successful ransom demands or multiple casualties. "Maya, those aren't costumes, and this isn't a game. Stay down and let me handle this." For the first time in 8 years, my sister had nothing to say about my tactical training being dress-up. The reality of armed violence had finally arrived to settle the argument she'd been making about the value of my career choices. The execution phase of what would become our family's most terrifying night was just beginning.
The transformation in Jessica's attitude was immediate and complete. The woman who'd spent 8 years mocking my tactical training was now gripping my arm with desperate intensity, whispering urgent questions about our survival chances while gunmen shouted commands outside the lodge. "Maya, how many are there? What do they want? Are we going to die?" The panic in her voice was the sound of someone whose comfortable worldview was shattering under the impact of real violence. 8 hostiles. Probably robbery or kidnapping, and not if I can help it, I replied, moving to a position where I could observe their approach patterns while keeping our family out of their sightlines. The tactical situation was exactly what I'd feared during my security assessment of Pine Ridge Lodge. The gunmen had positioned themselves to control all exits while maintaining clear fields of fire toward the building. Their equipment and coordination suggested military or law enforcement backgrounds, meaning they'd anticipated resistance and prepared accordingly. "Everyone, listen carefully," I called to our family members who were huddled in the dining room. "These men are professionals, but they're expecting wealthy civilians, not someone with tactical training. That gives us an advantage if we use it correctly." Jessica stared at me as if seeing her sister for the first time. "You actually know what you're doing." It wasn't a question. For the first time in 8 years, Jessica was acknowledging that my training might be relevant to a real situation rather than an elaborate game I played for attention. The lead gunman was approaching the front entrance while his team maintained perimeter positions that would prevent escape or outside intervention. I could hear him calling instructions to his men in tactical terminology that confirmed my assessment of their professional background. "Maya, how many are there? What do they want? Are we going to die?" The panic in her voice was the sound of someone whose comfortable worldview was shattering under the impact of real violence. 8 hostiles, probably robbery or kidnapping, and not if I can help it, I replied, moving to a position where I could observe their approach patterns while keeping our family out of their sightlines. The tactical situation was exactly what I'd feared during my security assessment of Pine Ridge Lodge.
The gunmen had positioned themselves to control all exits while maintaining clear fields of fire toward the building. Their equipment and coordination suggested military or law enforcement backgrounds, meaning they'd anticipated resistance and prepared accordingly. "Everyone listen carefully," I called to our family members who were huddled in the dining room. "These men are professionals, but they're expecting wealthy civilians, not someone with tactical training. That gives us an advantage if we use it correctly." Jessica stared at me as if seeing her sister for the first time. "You actually know what you're doing?" It wasn't a question. For the first time in 8 years, Jessica was acknowledging that my training might be relevant to a real situation rather than an elaborate game I played for attention. The lead gunman was approaching the front entrance while his team maintained perimeter positions that would prevent escape or outside intervention. I could hear him calling instructions to his men in tactical terminology that confirmed my assessment of their professional background. "Maya," my father whispered from where he was shielding my mother behind an overturned table, "what should we do?" The question carried weight beyond its immediate tactical implications. For 8 years, my family had deferred to Jessica's judgment on important decisions while treating my expertise as irrelevant to serious matters. Now, facing a life-or-death situation, they were instinctively turning to the skills they'd dismissed as dress-up games. "I'm going to neutralize the threat before they can establish control inside the building," I said, checking my weapon and calculating angles for engaging multiple targets. "Jessica, I need you to coordinate getting everyone to the basement storage room and barricading the door." "Coordinate how? I don't know anything about this." Jessica's corporate confidence had evaporated completely, leaving behind someone who'd never faced anything more dangerous than a difficult client presentation. I said, "Use the same leadership skills you use at your company. The stakes are just higher than quarterly earnings reports." The first gunman breached the front door at 7:31 p.m., his rifle raised and ready as he swept the entry hall for targets. He was expecting to find terrified civilians cowering in corners, not a SWAT-trained officer positioned for tactical advantage with years of close-quarters combat experience. The engagement lasted 17 seconds. My first shot took down the point man before he could acquire targets. My second and third shots neutralized his backup before they could establish firing positions. The remaining team members outside found themselves facing precision fire from a defender who understood their tactics better than they understood hers. "Maya's got a gun!" my cousin David shouted, apparently more shocked by my defensive capabilities than by the armed robbery attempt we were experiencing. "Maya's saving our lives," Jessica corrected, her voice carrying a mixture of awe and terror as she watched me move with the tactical precision she'd mocked for years. By 7:48 p.m., 4 gunmen were down and the remaining 4 were retreating toward their vehicles, abandoning their assault in the face of unexpected resistance from someone whose training they hadn't anticipated. Jessica found me checking the wounded and securing weapons while we waited for law enforcement to arrive. "Maya," she said quietly, "I'm sorry. I didn't understand. I didn't know." The reversal was complete. The sister who'd spent years characterizing my career as expensive dress-up was now acknowledging that my toys had just saved our entire family from a nightmare that her corporate skills couldn't have prevented or resolved.
3 years after the Pine Ridge Lodge incident, I stood before a packed auditorium at the Colorado Law Enforcement Training Academy, delivering the keynote address at their annual conference on tactical readiness and civilian protection. The audience included police chiefs, SWAT commanders, and federal agents from across the western United States, all gathered to hear about the night that had redefined how law enforcement viewed family protection and off-duty preparedness. The case study of Pine Ridge Lodge had become legendary in tactical training circles, a textbook example of how proper preparation and quick thinking could neutralize a superior force and protect civilians in an isolated environment. But more than the tactical lessons, it was the personal transformation story that resonated with audiences nationwide.
Jessica sat in the front row, now serving as executive director of the Civilian Crisis Preparedness Foundation we'd established together. The corporate executive, who'd once mocked tactical training as dress-up, had become one of the country's leading advocates for teaching basic security awareness to families and businesses. The foundation has trained over 50,000 civilians in basic threat recognition and emergency response, I told the audience, clicking to a slide showing our program statistics. We've learned that the gap between perception and reality about personal safety can be deadly, especially for people who assume that violence is something that happens to other families. Our program was revolutionary because it bridged the disconnect between law enforcement expertise and civilian needs. Instead of teaching complex tactical skills, we focused on awareness, preparation, and cooperation with professionals during emergencies. Jessica's corporate communication skills had proven invaluable in translating police concepts into language that soccer moms and business executives could understand and implement. The media attention following Pine Ridge had launched both our careers in directions neither of us had anticipated. I'd been promoted to SWAT team leader and was now consulting with federal agencies on domestic security protocols. My expertise in protecting civilians during armed encounters had made me a sought-after instructor for law enforcement agencies nationwide. But perhaps the most satisfying triumph was personal. The family dynamics that had been poisoned by years of professional dismissal had been completely reversed. Jessica's transformation from skeptic to advocate had healed relationships and created new respect for the value of tactical preparedness. Maya saved all our lives that night, Jessica had told CNN during our first national interview. I spent years thinking her training was just expensive playing. But when real violence came to our family, her toys and games were the only thing standing between us and a massacre. The Pine Ridge gunmen had been part of a robbery crew that specialized in targeting wealthy families at isolated locations. They had successfully robbed 3 other families before encountering resistance they couldn't overcome. My intervention had not only saved our family, but ended a crime spree that had terrorized affluent communities across Colorado. The 4 surviving gunmen had been convicted on federal charges and sentenced to life in prison. During their trial, they testified that they'd never encountered a civilian with tactical training and had been completely unprepared for organized resistance from their intended victims. Our grandmother, now 93, had become the foundation's most effective spokesperson. She told audiences at our fundraising events, "Maya showed us that protecting family isn't about having money or influence. It's about having people who are willing to stand between danger and the ones they love." The dress-up narrative that had defined our relationship for 8 years had been permanently silenced by 17 seconds of real violence that proved the value of everything Jessica had dismissed. The tactical gear she'd mocked as costumes had stopped bullets. The training she'd characterized as playing had saved lives. The career she diminished as a phase had become the foundation for protecting other families from similar nightmares. But the most meaningful triumph wasn't professional recognition or media attention. It was the relationship Jessica and I had rebuilt based on mutual respect rather than condescension, shared mission rather than sibling rivalry, and the understanding that some skills can't be properly evaluated until they're tested under the most serious circumstances possible. The sister who had accused me of playing dress-up had learned that when real bullets start flying, the difference between games and training becomes crystal clear to everyone involved.
Standing in my home office 5 years later, looking at the framed newspaper headline that read, "Off-duty officer saves family from armed robbery," I finally understood the gift Jessica had unknowingly given me through years of dismissive mockery. Her constant challenges to prove my worth had pushed me to become better at my job than I might have been if she'd simply supported my choices from the beginning. My daughter Emma, now 3 years old, with my husband David's gentle nature and my stubborn determination, discovered me studying the article one evening as I prepared for a speech at the FBI Academy about the psychology of civilian protection. "Mommy, why is your picture in the newspaper?" she asked, with the innocent curiosity that cuts straight to the heart of complex issues. I'd been dreading this conversation, knowing that eventually I'd need to explain why Aunt Jessica had once been mean to me, why some of our family photos showed tension rather than joy, why the story of our family included violence and danger alongside love and celebration. Sometimes, sweetheart, people don't understand that different jobs are important in different ways, I said, lifting her onto my lap while she played with her toy police car, a gift from Jessica, who now understood the value of what I did. Aunt Jessica thought my job wasn't important, but she learned that all jobs that help people are special. Like how doctors help sick people and police help scared people? Emma asked, with the clear logic that adults often complicate. Exactly like that. And sometimes the people who don't understand at first become the best helpers later. What Jessica's years of mockery had taught me was the difference between external validation and internal conviction, between proving yourself to others and knowing your own worth. True confidence, I learned, wasn't dependent on family approval or social recognition. Confidence came from competence earned through training, tested under pressure, and validated by results that mattered more than opinion. The wisdom I'd gained from her dismissal extended far beyond personal resilience. Through the foundation and our training programs, I'd seen how societal misconceptions about security and preparedness left families vulnerable to preventable tragedies. People assumed that violence was random and unpredictable, when it was often calculated and preventable with proper awareness. One of the most important lessons I've learned, I told audiences at security conferences, is that the skills we dismiss as unnecessary or extreme are often the ones that matter most when comfort zones collapse and real threats emerge. This perspective had transformed how we approach civilian security training. Instead of teaching fear or paranoia, we taught practical awareness and confident response. We helped families understand that being prepared for danger didn't mean living in fear. It meant living with the confidence that came from knowing you could protect what mattered most. Jessica's transformation from skeptic to advocate had become a powerful teaching tool. Her corporate background and communication skills allowed her to reach audiences who might dismiss security advice from law enforcement professionals. She could speak to families in language they understood about concepts they needed to grasp. I spent 8 years making fun of my sister's tactical gear. I thought it was silly and unnecessary, until the night it saved my life. Now I understand that being prepared isn't paranoid, it's responsible. The foundation had helped thousands of families develop security awareness and emergency preparedness skills. We'd prevented crimes through education, stopped attacks through training, and saved lives through preparation that bridged the gap between law enforcement expertise and civilian need. But perhaps the most profound wisdom came from understanding that sometimes the people who challenge us most severely are giving us exactly what we need to become who we're meant to be. Jessica's mockery had motivated me to pursue excellence. Her dismissal had strengthened my resolve, and her eventual transformation had validated years of dedication to skills she'd once considered worthless. The tactical gear she'd called costumes had saved our family. The training she'd dismissed as games had prevented a massacre. The career she'd characterized as dress-up had become the foundation for protecting other families from similar nightmares. Standing in my office, surrounded by commendations and photos from the Foundation's work, I felt profound gratitude for a lesson I never expected to learn. Sometimes, the most valuable gifts come disguised as criticism, and the people who doubt us most can become our greatest motivators if we choose growth over resentment.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.